Greetings, I am Herbert Erpaderp, and a couple of weeks ago I paid a visit to Tamborine, Queensland to finally receive a birthday gift. A ride on this, tankride.com.au's Centurion driver trainer tank. But we'll have a look at that later. First, a little look at the collection they have here. It's not a huge collection, but it is an interesting one. This is not a museum after all, but a private collection. Tim Wood, the guy who owns and runs this place, gives a very interesting talk about all the vehicles he has here. I didn't film it though, so if you want to hear his words, you'll just have to come here. This first vehicle is kind of odd looking. This is a tracked Rapier missile launcher. Apparently the only one in Australia. I don't have a lot of knowledge of these things, so I'm not going to say much. It was really cool to get a nice close look at this stuff, especially the inside. My camera work isn't the best, but hey, it could always be worse. Unsurprisingly, the 8 missiles this thing would be carrying are no longer mounted. The chipped paint is really interesting to look at, especially from the perspective of a modeler. Those seats really don't look very comfortable at all. There was this pair of Jeeps. One is an actual Jeep from the US, and the other is the British equivalent. I believe it's an Austin Champ. There's also this truck. This is an International ACO, which is an entertaining name. Apparently it stands for Australian Constructed Cab Over. This type of truck was used by Australian forces in the Vietnam War. It's not an especially attractive looking cab front, but it looks like it means business. Beside it is the teeny tiny Sabre. The blue thing sitting in the gun barrel is a 30mm round. Or was it 20mm this thing fired? I forget. This thing was described as a rally car on tracks. You can get rides on it, that's why it's so dirty, but it's not especially cheap, though one day, who knows, maybe I will ride it. Look at that dirty tank ass. Next we have this amphibious truck thing. This is an Alvis Stalwart, and it carries something like 18 people on rides here. They also use the crane to service their tanks when needed. And finally, we have these Ferret Scout cars, which are teeny tiny and adorable. The one on the right had only just arrived, and that's why it's still so clean. Apparently, this one bites. Looks like someone's tempting fate here. Such a rebel. These things are ridiculously tiny, and I don't believe I could get inside, and if I did, I probably couldn't get out. Either way, they're very cool. When you arrive here, before you get to ride on any vehicles, there's an interesting talk given. Tim speaks about all the vehicles that he owns, including the 4 Centurion variants. Those being 2 gun tanks, one which would normally have a dozer blade, 1 bridge layer, and the tank I'll be riding today, the driver trainer tank. There's a demonstration of the various ammo used in all the vehicles. Obviously not live ammo, and as you see here, there's an engine from a Centurion, the Rolls-Royce Meteor. I was trying to conserve battery, so I didn't film much of the presentation, and if I did, I don't think I would like to post it all anyway because I feel like the speech was part of the experience, and I would be taking away from that if I gave it away on the internet. He did tell us some history of the tanks. It seems the driver trainer tank was converted from a gun tank that had had its turret damaged by RPGs to the point that it couldn't be repaired, so they converted it. Then we went outside to where the tanks were parked. I found the bridge layer pretty interesting. The bridge itself is elsewhere on the property. We had a bit of a wander around and a look at things. I was struck by how huge and shiny those spotlights are. There should be infrared lenses on them, but they've been removed. Apparently they can blind people, and these are functional tanks, except the guns. You can see the gun barrels have been filled in. This tank here would normally have a dozer blade attached, but it was apparently removed because it was a pain in the arse. The dried mud and gunk caught in the tracks was pretty interesting. Also, looking at the treads, you can see that they're shiny, but not extremely so. Looking at them from a distance reaffirms in my mind my dislike for painting tracks with excessively shiny metallic colours. They're really kind of dull. Then Tim came out and spoke about the tanks a bit more. He gave some history about the particular vehicles that he owns and how he came to own them and so forth. It was quite interesting. He shared with us a series of pictures that he has of his tanks, and I'll show you those now. These were active vehicles and did see combat in Vietnam. I believe one of the tanks drove over a mine on 2 different occasions. And they've been bogged on multiple occasions both in Vietnam and here in Australia. These were really cool pictures. The driver trainer tank was started up while I was filming the pictures, and it headed out with the first group of riders. The smell was unpleasant and it was dusty, but it was still awesome to see and hear. It's a bit unfortunate that there were people in the way, but I was there to enjoy myself anyway. The video is kind of secondary. Goodbye. It's very nice and green around here. Very pleasant. I watched as they drove off and then went about climbing on the gun tank. Who wouldn't? This lamp was apparently made in Eindhoven. Interesting. Here I am just looking at the various bits of the tank. Standing on the hull offered a really good vantage point of the upper portion of the bridge layer. Here's the driver's hatch. Getting into the driver's position was quite tricky. I am by no means a small fellow, and the hatch is a little bit smaller than my shoulder width, but I did manage to get in. I didn't manage to video the inside very well. It's both dark and cramped, and I absolutely do not envy the men who drove these things for long periods of time. I'm comfortable. This vision device is missing the wiper part of its wiper. Standing on top of the turret is a kind of cool vantage point to watch the tank ride. He had it teetering there on that hill for a while. I doubted my ability to fit into the loader's hatch, so I didn't. Though on the inside it did look a little bit more spacious than the driver's position at least. Not that that's saying much.
For digging.
During his presentation, Tim mentioned that the paperwork we signed included a clause saying that we would shovel if the tank became bogged. You can see Tim climbing back into the driver's position here. He stops the tank through the ride, jumps out, and talks about some points of interest. And then down he goes. The audio recording isn't so great, there's people talking and such, but that's a loud machine. Sounds cool, though I would be annoyed if it were to drive past my house frequently. Then I got into the commander's position. This hatch was much more comfortable to get in and out of. Apparently it's one of the larger tank commander's hatches that have existed. There was a person I didn't know in the loader's position. It was really interesting to look at all the stuff in here. It was also very hot and not at all comfortable. The vision devices and stuff like that are all here, and you can look through them. I felt very commanderly. I can totally see why the commander might want to stand up out of the turret to get good vision. Also fresh air. This position would have been even more uncomfortable if the gunner was in his position in front of the commander. Going into battle in this thing must have been miserable. Better than being on the outside of it though, I suppose. I didn't really have a whole lot of time to climb all over the tank, because I didn't want to miss my ride. That would be silly. So I climbed down from the gun tank more or less just in time. The other group's ride ended and the tank pulled up with a fresh coating of mud. I climb aboard, Tim jumps into the driver's position with ease, and off we go. I'll reduce my rambling a little bit now. My camera work is not the best, but enjoy anyway. Here we go, up the hill to Tita. Unfortunately, this time he didn't manage to get the balance quite right. It must be a tricky thing to do. Apparently the Centurion is not the easiest thing to drive. I've obviously edited out the bits where Tim was talking to us. It was interesting though. You should go there and hear his tales. What he told us this time was that he was going to get a run up and get into 4th gear to go over a bump nice and fast. We were advised to hold on. That was bumpy, but a lot smoother than expected. The whole ride was actually quite smooth. Here, Tim points out the bridge belonging to the bridge layer. That seems like a good spot for it, I suppose, but it would have been more fun if we got to ride over it. We're told about these sheep. This one either has a death wish, or they're just so used to the tanks that they're no longer worried, and not all too bright. Either way, I was amused. Stupid sheep. Then, sadly, the ride was over, and the tank was parked. That was a lot of fun. I'm definitely going to have to come back and ride on some of the other vehicles, namely the gun tank. The cost for that is significantly higher, like $500. They use a lot of fuel, so I can't exactly justify the cost now, but I feel like it's something that I need to do. One day. We were told to be careful. The tank often backfires when it's shut down. Then we left, and my friend and I had balls for lunch. Balls. So, that was my tank ride. If you know of any other tanks I can ride, or have interesting experiences of your own to share, let me know in the comments section below. And of course, if you haven't done so already, feel free to subscribe to me here on YouTube, follow me on social media, and watch me live stream on Twitch. And if you really like the things I do, please consider helping to support the channel over at Patreon. Links to all of those things are in the description below. As always, I shall return soon, so until then, keep being awesome, and thanks for watching. Farewell.